All right, guys, so we're going to talk about dopamine in regards to laziness and then feeling unmotivated. So this video isn't going to be for everybody, but if the following statements kind of like tap into you or speak to a certain part of you, then this video might be for you. So if you feel like your life is empty and boring, or you're trapped by your distraction cycles, you're addicted to feeling good,
I love it.
lack of motivation, you have a lack of motivation, you judge yourself for being lazy, or you have dreams but can't seem to act on them, or you just constantly have this like inner struggle with yourself where you're like, why am I like this? You know, like if any of those statements kind of like tap into you or like speak to you or feels like, you know, it's speaking to a certain part of you, then this video might be helpful. So stick along or stick around, and then hopefully I have something, one or two things that would be helpful for you. So these are the things that we're going to tap into in this video. So we're going to go down the list of this. So first of all, we're going to kind of describe what dopamine is. A lot of people think it's dopamine is the pleasure molecule, right? Like it just makes you feel good. And that's kind of like a side effect of it. But what it really is the thing that gets you up and going. So it's kind of the thing that makes you pursue something. So if one way that we want to think about it is like if we want a donut, and we're currently down here, dopamine is going to be the thing that helps us get to it, right? So after we have a donut, we're going to have a drop off because it's not dopamine anymore once we have something. So one way of describing it would be when we want something, right? When we want to get something, grab something, this is dopamine. The pursuit or the seeking or the wanting of something is dopamine. The moment we hold on to it and we have it, that is no longer dopamine. That is serotonin, or so then it's going to be a fall off, right? So the pursuit of something versus the having of something are two completely different mechanisms. So we're going to focus on the pursuit because we're right down here and we want to be able to feel not lazy, to act. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. So that's what dopamine is. It's the pursuit, the seeking or wanting of something. So then when it comes to dopamine, this is something crucial that we're going to need to figure out or learn about.
Well, why don't you just put some broccoli in there?
Baseline. So the way we want to think about baseline is if we have a graph and then dopamine, let's say dopamine is 0 down here and this is 100. Our baseline is going to be somewhere down towards the bottom. And this is going to be what's called a tonic baseline. That just means it's your like tone of living, your mode of living. So this is like the beat of your drum, like because every human being feels dopamine at every single moment. We just feel it so little as a like normal mode of being that we don't really recognize it. But we need dopamine to be able to just move around, you know, to just be. So we all have this constant, you know, I guess like, you know, amount of dopamine at any given moment. We never fall to 0. No one ever falls to 0. I think the only people that fall to 0 are dead. So no one ever falls down to 0. We always need dopamine to just move around, be with life, right? So that's what's going to be your tonic baseline. We also have this other thing called a phasic baseline, which is the thing that you see most often when people talk about dopamine, which is the up and then the down, the up and down. This is your phasic baseline. So then the one way of thinking about it would be kind of like if you had phases in your life where you were an emo, a goth, you were bald for a certain period of your time. It wasn't your whole life, right? It was just a phase. It had a beginning and an end, and then it's behind you now, right? So it was a phase of life. So this is what this is. It's a phasic baseline. So down this way, this is the progression of your day. Right? So if you have like 5 a.m. here and then 5 p.m. here, you're going to have phases throughout your day. So you're going to have some ups and downs throughout your day. And then when you don't have those ups and downs, you're just going to fall back down to your baseline, right? So then this is your normal way of being. Then you do something exciting, then you go back. And then you do something that you hate, then you go back, right? So it works both ways. So then the up and down is what we would call a seesaw effect. So in a good book called, not the good book, but a good book would be the, Dopamine Nation, where it talks about this specifically in much more detail. But the gist of it is this. So if we're currently here in our day and we want to be, and we want to be here, we want a donut, we want to play a video game, we want to do something, right? We're going to get dopamine, right? So we're going to go up. And then, so the seesaw effect means that dopamine will rise, will drop the same amount that it rose, right? So then it'll go back down to baseline. But then what it also says is that if you have a high enough spike, you actually drop below baseline. So then if you, let's say this was a walk, we're not going off of this reference right now. So if this was a walk, this is a low dopamine based activity, right? Then, for example, we want something that's more stimulating, which, let's say, for example, we want to play a video game. Then there's going to be huge rise, but there's also going to be a huge drop. And it's going to drop below baseline, not at 0. So again, we're not going off of this reference right now, but it's going to drop below baseline. And then now, this is your current phasic baseline, because it doesn't change your tonic baseline, but it changes your current phasic baseline. So your current phase right now, how you're feeling, is down in the dumps. Life is boring. Like, we just crashed down below baseline. So this is pain, and this is also boredom. The brain doesn't know how to differentiate between the two, because pain is boredom and boredom is pain, right? So then if we're here, what tends to happen is anytime we're below baseline or tonic baseline, we have this feeling of craving. So anything like boredom and craving. So then whenever you feel bored, you're craving pleasure again. So this is only because our brain tries to maintain equilibrium, homeostasis, which is your baseline, right? So if it goes up, it wants to maintain homeostasis, so it comes down. And when it goes down, it wants to maintain homeostasis, so it'll go up. But what happens here is, the deeper into below our baseline we are, the stronger that sense of craving becomes, or that sense of boredom. The stronger the boredom, the stronger the craving, the more likely we are to fall prey to something that'll bring us back up. So usually, without intervention, your baseline after a few hours will go back down to normal, right? But then this usually means a few hours of boredom, a few hours of craving, right? So then our brains usually, like, we crave something, right? We crave pleasure. So it's going to want to spike it back to baseline, or to spike it above baseline. It just wants to not feel bored, not feel pain. So at bare minimum, I want to feel normal again, right? Which is your tonic baseline. At most, I want to feel as good as I did right before I crashed, right? So then what'll happen is that we fall prey to the high dopamine activities that initially got us to that point, right? So then we'll have, for example, if we continue throughout our day, we'll continue to have the huge spike. So let's delete this. Okay, so then we're going to have that huge spike that we initially have. Let's say we fall prey to that same activity, more video games, right? And then let's delete all this. So then we come up, and then we also go down. So then something you'll notice here is that it's the exact same amount of dopamine, but it's not going to the same spots that it was going before. So I copy and pasted it just so that you can see that I'm not like doing it consciously, like making them smaller. So if you see here, there's going to be a difference. There's going to be a difference between these two spaces. So it's the exact same amount of dopamine, right? But for whatever reason, this second one is much lower than the first one, right? So then why this happens is because now your starting point was below baseline instead at baseline. So if you can see here, you started below baseline versus initially you started at baseline. So it's the exact same amount of dopamine, but now you don't feel that exact same surge as you did that first time. This is what's known as tolerance, right? So the more you do it, the less pleasurable it becomes. This is because each time, now for the third time, you're starting below the first spike, the first downfall or dip. It's called a trough, but let's just call it a dip, right? Before the first dip. So the second dip is much lower. That also means that the third activity of, I guess that's the wrong one. But the third one, let's just highlight, see if it works. Oh, no, it's not going to do it. So that this third activity for video games is actually going to be much lower when it comes crashing, and it's going to be less pleasurable, so on and so forth, right? And if you do this throughout your day. So that's the seesaw effect, and the overstimulation is what happens when you do this. So when you do activity after activity after activity, then your brain becomes overstimulated. And if your brain becomes overstimulated, it'll do a series of 3 things. One, it'll lower your baseline, but your tonic baseline. Forgive my spelling. So this just means that the next day, your baseline will be lower, slightly lower. And then the day after that, if you continue this overstimulation, it'll be lower, then lower, then lower. And before you know it, it's very low. So what this takes, your baseline, your tonic baseline, if it's high or low, dictates your general sense of well-being. So this means you'll know when it's low because, let's say, for example, at this moment, you were to pause the video, take 2 minutes away from any devices, from any stimulation, and you were to just sit left to your own thoughts. Would you consider that moment enjoyable, or would you consider that moment boring? You're moving your leg, you're shaking, you're hoping that time moves faster so that you could gain stimulation again. So that's dictated by your baseline. So in that example, or if you did it for real, and you notice that, like, no, I actually was able to find joy, like, without really like seeking it, right? That means you have a pretty good sense of well-being, right? You don't need stimulation like throughout your day. You could feel okay if you went without your stimulation. But if you were like, oh, fuck, this is boring, right? Then that probably means that your baseline is lower and you've had a series of overstimulating days, weeks, months, years maybe that have led to your lowered baseline. So this just means that you can't enjoy simple things. Things that used to bring you joy when you were a kid aren't bringing you joy now. So it's like, now you're like, I wish I was a kid again, because like that sense of like no stress. Stress is an influencer to dopamine, but you're thinking that just the lack of responsibility was the thing that made you feel present and enjoying your childhood, when in actuality is you probably had a less stimulating childhood, so you had a higher baseline, which is one of many factors, right? But when it comes to like the enjoyment of this moment, dopamine is a huge factor. So then when it comes to overstimulation, it's your tonic baseline. It's low baseline. So if you're feeling like life sucks, life's boring, like as a whole, remember, you have phases. So moments can be boring, but if your life is boring, that probably has to do with not the phases, but with the tonic, your beat of your drum, right? So that means we have to find some kind of intervention to be able to bring it back up. We'll get to that later. So then the other thing that your brain does is it downregulates your receptors. Downregulates. All this means is that if we go up here, you have your receptor. I'm gonna make it look like a bone. And then boom. And then you have your receptor, let's say. And then you have your neuron. And then you have your synaptic cleft. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Right? So then they're pushing dopamine down this way, and it receives it. And then, okay, so then we have this. So what happens is with the receptors, right? So you're getting overstimulated, right? You're pushing so much dopamine constantly that your receptors are like, whoa, bro, that's so much stimulation. We need to bring it down, right? There's so much dopamine, we need to bring it down. So the reason why it does this is homeostasis again. So there's a lot of downsides and negative effects when it comes to overstimulation to the neurons. So what happens is you can get neurotoxicity, I think brain damage, and a series of like other negative factors. So your brain doesn't want to do that to itself. So what it does is it downregulates the receptors, which means that instead of feeling 100% of the dopamine that it leaches onto or is able to catch, right? It'll now feel, let's say, 70% of it. So out of 100 nanomolars of, that's how dopamine is measured. Out of 100, it'll only feel 70 of them, right? So then that's a huge huge decrease, right? So then it downregulates. You have a lowered baseline and it downregulates. So you have less ability to feel dopamine. So if you're still getting this amount of dopamine, right, from the original example, you're going to feel this much of it. So not only is it phasic, but instead of feeling this much, you're actually going to feel this much. So instead of going up here, it's going to go down here. So now look at the huge difference between those two, right? So you have a lower tonic baseline, and in moments, in phases, you have a lowered phasic baseline, right? And then you have a less ability to feel that same amount as the original because of your down regulation. And the third thing that it's going to do, it's going to deplete your dopamine. So all this means is that the vesicles, is what they're called, vesicles. I don't know if you want to think about them as testicles or anything. So the vesicles were up here, right, with dopamine, but you use so much of it back to back that you've actually depleted them, right? So instead of having that much dopamine, now you have this much dopamine. And the reality is that it requires a lot of stimulation for this to happen, and these usually replenish within at most like 1 to 2 hours of like consecutive dopamine, you know. Usually if you give them time, like 5 minutes to fully replenish, but then that's just getting too much in the weeds. So the reality is that if you do go dopamine after high dopamine after high dopamine activity, is you'll deplete these. So not only it's pushing out less dopamine, you get to feel, when it gets here, you get to feel less of those. So if this is 100, or instead of pushing out 100, now it's pushing out 50. And instead of feeling all 50, now you'll feel only 30. And when it gets to your baseline, your new baseline, now it's only gonna increase to 30. And let's say your current baseline at this moment, when it's super low, it's to, oh wait, this is your tonic baseline. So then boom, so you're only gonna feel 30 because this is your new tonic baseline, which is why it's not red. It has decreased, so that's why it was red before, because to show you how much it's decreased. So now you only feel 30. So if we go back to this was 100, but now you get to feel 30, and look, it's much lower than when it was before, because now you also have a lowered baseline. So all of these three factors come together for you to feel life sucks, life is boring, why am I lazy? You know, all of these things come together for you to just, you've overstimulated for so long, you've depended on this stimulation to feel good, but it's kind of like a cycle, right? Because the more you overstimulate to feel good, the more you have the capacity to feel it, and the more you crave it, right? So now you're gonna seek it out. So it's like, now I depend on it because life sucks. I just want to feel something, right? Something it sucks. It sucks to be at that place where it's like, I just want to feel something, right? So then that's overstimulation. And then anhedonia is that constant state of like lack of pleasure. Life's boring. Like, I don't care. Like, you could care, but your actions don't show it because you just don't have the capacity to pursue, right? You don't have the capacity to move because it's just not interesting and it's not exciting anymore. You can't pursue it, not because you don't want to mentally, but because you physically, your body, your mechanisms don't allow you to feel excited about it anymore. So what happens now is then you start pushing yourself towards, you start leaning and start seeing a lot of videos about discipline, right? So then you'll start seeing a lot of this, right? So discipline just means it's kind of like kind of a mentality for Stoics where it's like, you feel like ass, you feel like shit, just do it, right? Just do it. So then it's like, then you try to motivate yourself like, okay, so then if we're talking about it, so then it's like 0, 100. Your baseline is extremely fucking low, your tonic baseline, right? Your capacity to feel dopamine isn't at 100 anymore. It's at 30. So then it's like, Okay, so then you're trying to get yourself to move, to motivate, right? But nothing is exciting unless it's the things that you've depended on for dopamine. And then you're like, oh, but I want to do this activity that I hate. Just force yourself to do it. When you force yourself to do anything, you're going in the opposite direction because it is subjectively not pleasurable. Subjectively is a key word, right? Because we can eventually convince ourselves that something is exciting, right? Depending on how we frame it. And this is where psychological frameworks can come into play, right? Because all of this is contextual and seen through your perception but it can be manipulated, right? So this is something else. We're not diving into that completely, really, but that is something that you could dive into later. Seek it out for yourself. But I mean, these are things that I'm gonna share with you on my free community. So if you are interested in any of this has been speaking to you, like go check out my free community. I'm gonna link it in the bio. So, but yeah, let me just get down to it. So hopefully I'll see you there because I'm everything that I learn I'm just gonna put on there for free for you guys to just learn, and then hopefully it can help you guys. So then what discipline means, and because something is subjectively hard, that means instead of going up, we're actually going down. And then, so the mentality of a stoic or of the discipline mindset is to fuck it. It's going to suck. Just do it. Just do it. So you're going to have constant cycles of struggling. So then boom, 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 right? Which is good. I don't want to get too much into the weeds with this, but this is the mentality of a stoic, of a discipline. This is why you hear this advice so much. But you tell me, if you can't get yourself to do something this much with this much dopamine because it's just meh, it doesn't compare to the high dopamine that you're used to. If you can't get yourself to do this, what makes us think, which we can, but what makes us think at this moment, we're going to want to do this, right? So this is something that I struggled with, which is why I needed to look for answers, because I'm not the kind of person that the discipline mindset is for. I fucking hate it. It's just not for me. It's just, there are times where you're going to have to do shit that sucks. That's life. But to continuously like fall prey to just like life sucks, like let me just do tough shit like all the time nonstop, and then it's like I crave pleasure, but then I'm seeking to deprive myself more of it. It's like, if you are that kind of person, sure, like you could seek that. You could find a way to make that work, or find a way to reframe it with psychological frameworks, right? Finding a way to contextually reframe it so that it's pleasurable and not painful, right? You could do that. But then the other thing that you could do is, why not just reset everything? Why not just replenish your vesicles? Right? So we want to do those three things. We want to replenish the vesicles. We also want to increase baseline, our tonic baseline. And then we also want to upregulate our receptors. And not the fucked up part about this, but like the hard pill to swallow when it comes to this. Not a lot of us want to hear this, but we got to go without it. We got to go without our stimulation. We got to go without our overstimulation. Overstimmy. We got to go without overstimulation. So that, just like we talked about earlier, when something comes up and it goes down, it has a period where it needs time so it can go back to baseline. So what we need to do is we need to give it a long time, a long period where it can do that. It can go up. It has the capacity to do so, just like it did so, to upregulate. If it has a capacity to come crashing down, it has a capacity to build itself back up. That's just how we work. So we need to go without it. Now, I'm going to go a little bit into detail of what the dopamine detox means, because a lot of people think it's just like go without pleasure, just suffer through 30 days, 60 days, right? Like just no joy, no pleasure, no pursuit, no seeking, no nothing. But that's not life. Life is seeking, life is holding, right? Life is seeking, life is holding, life is appreciating, life is love, life is all of these things. So you can't get rid of an aspect of life that's necessary for living. We just can't. But what we can do is get rid of those unhealthy forms of living, the things that are only serving themselves. So when it comes to the solution, which is the dopamine, we're going to call it the dopamine reset, right? Is distinguishing between stimulations. So one is going to be the selfish stimulation, the stimulation that's only in it for itself and only in it for pleasure. And then we're going to have the healthy forms of stimulation, which are those that are going to improve our life. One way or another, it improves our life. So for example, does your work bring you or used to bring you some kind of pursuit, right? Like joy in pursuit? Could you pick up a new hobby? Could you dive deeper into things that you're currently enjoying that are healthy for you, that are improving your life, that are helping your sense of well-being, like that make you enjoy life more? Singing, listening to music. These things listening to music isn't a high dopamine activity, but it could, if you're also present with it, could also be a beautiful experience, right? So how can we increase the healthy seeking and then decrease the unhealthy seeking? So that's what we want to do with the dopamine reset. We don't want to go without seeking. We want to go without the seeking that's leading us nowhere, and then replace it with the seeking that's taking us somewhere and improving our lives in some way. So that's kind of the goal with all of this. So figure out and distinguish between your dopamine activities, your pursuing activities. Like, is this activity helping you, or helping a certain part of your life, or is it not? Right? So then that's kind of the solution that I kind of like wanted to tell you about, something that you should dive into. So if you're curious about it, and you suffer from like, bro, I've tried it, bro, like it hasn't worked for me, like I try to go without it and I just come back. Like if it's that bad for you, because it was for me, I'm looking for ways constantly to be able to make that not the case, and to increase your tools by which you can make it towards the 30 to 60 days of dopamine detox. That's also another thing too. If you are going to do this, you'll hear a lot of people say, my preference is 7 days, right? My preference is 14 days. And the reality is that these numbers are not long enough for you to see long-term effects, especially the ones that you've created over years of usage, months of usage, right? So you need anywhere from 30 to 90 days. Between 60 and 90, some say that this is where you'll start finding less significant growth, but between 30 to 60 is where you'll notice a huge difference. A huge difference between where your life was and where your life is now, and your sense of well-being, your ability to feel joy in pursuit. You'll feel a significant difference in where you were and where you are now between the 30 to 60 days. So you'll hear people talk about 7 days, like all I do, and then I just remove like one or two things. It's like, no, we got to remove the overstimulation, the selfish overstimulation. So, and then 14 days, like you'll notice some changes with that short period of time, but not any significant changes. So if you're at a point in your life where your tonic baseline, life is boring, and you feel trapped, where it's like, I wish I could do more with my life. I wish I could want to chase these things because I know that I want to. I only set these goals because I want it. But why am I not chasing it, right? So this is making me a little emotional, because this taps into me, because this was my struggle with it. It's like, I set goals not because it's like, oh, it's cool to set goals. I set goals because a part of me wants to fulfill that potential, to bridge that gap between where I am and where I want to be, but I can't find myself to do it. Why can't I do it, right? So I had to look for answers. So this is the thing that I realized was the source problem. It was, I created a series of just those three things that were coming crashing down, and my life wasn't going anywhere good if I continued those behaviors. So if I wanted to gain control of my life again, I need to fix these behaviors. I need to go with the overstimulation. So that's something that kind of leads me to the relapse, right? Where it's like a lot of us yes, Manny, I want to do 30 days, 60 days, Manny. Yes, I want to. But then a lot of us fall prey to those cravings, to that trough, that deep trough past your tonic baseline. We fall prey to those. So then I'm in my community, I'm gonna come come up with as many strategies that I can find and give them to you for free, just so that, you know, to be able to help you, to be able to get you to where you want to be. So if any of this speaks to you, you know, just come and join me. I'd love to have you there.